Kauffman represents the 89th, and at the end of this year, it will totally be in Franklin County.
Oh, nice.
We're really glad to have them here. Thank you.
Well, it's great to be here. I follow some great folks. Todd Brock, who was a couple of folks ago, I understand, before Kathy Rapp. He's my neighbor to the south, and we've become good friends over the last 8 years. And Kathy Rapp and I, we came into the house together, and she is my nearest and dearest friend in Harrisburg. So that's why she stuck around. Well, just a funny story. When we were first, shortly after we were elected, she's already chuckling. She knows the story I'm going to tell. Shortly after we were elected, the local paper was following me around, and you know, first-term legislator, and what I do during the day. And it just so happened that day that Representative Rapp and I were going to lunch together. And I'm very sensitive. I have a wife and 4 children at home, and very devoted. And it's very important to me, the perception at home of what I do, because I guard my steps very carefully, as I think is one of the flaws that many elected officials don't do. But yeah, thank you, Debbie. But I wanted to make sure the local paper didn't have me going out to lunch with some you know what, I don't know. And I said to the reporter, I said, make sure you know Kathy's old enough to be my mother. Oh. And I know Kathy's my dear friend, so I knew that she would totally not be offended by that. And they printed that, thank goodness. But in Harrisburg, that was a chuckle around Harrisburg that they actually printed that in the newspaper. But anyway, Kathy and I are just dear friends, and we commiserate together as we fight the conservative fight in Harrisburg. And Senator Eichelberger is a great addition to Franklin County. We're glad to have him as part of our delegation here in Harrisburg, because he's one of the good guys on the other side of the building, and there are a few. Sorry, I didn't mean to say that. But, you know, a few things I thought I'd chat about. I could talk on about the unions and the fight against unions and what the public sector unions, what they're doing. Senator Eichelberger and I are the prime sponsors of identical Act 111 legislation. His is in the Senate, mine is in the House, and it is absolutely identical, just to attempt to give a little bit more balance to the Act 111 arbitration process. Whenever you have really it's public safety unions, police, firefighters, as we attempt to give balance to that arbitration process, because it is really one-sided toward the unions. And so we have identical legislation. We've been working together on that. I know there are a couple of issues that are important to some of you. I know Common Core is probably something that many of you are concerned about. I have to tell you, if you are concerned about Common Core, you don't belong in Harrisburg, because those of us who are very, very concerned about Common Core and have done things against that are generally pariahs in all of Harrisburg, not just in Democrat circles or liberal circles, but in what you would consider Republican circles. The establishment is 100% for Common Core in Harrisburg, and I can tell you that definitively. Last year, it was last year about this time, we started, a few of us started to work on the issue of Common Core and how we start to try to combat it. And we actually started by sending a letter. There were about 4 or 5 of us who signed on a letter to the governor, asking him to delay the implementation of the standards. That was actually, somewhat beneficial. It was set to be implemented, I believe, in June, and it was delayed until the fall. Nonetheless, I think that was a foregone conclusion with the political and really the public education establishment 100% behind this initiative. Am I against standards? Am I against knowing where our young people are? No, I have 4 kids. I want to make sure they get a great education. My daughter is actually studying. She's in 8th grade, and she's studying rigorously now for her first Keystone. As an 8th grader, she's taking her Algebra 1 Keystone exam this spring. And so she's studying vigorously for that. And there's a place for that standardized testing. But what our young people are being overloaded with testing. And we are having teachers and classrooms that are built to the test. They're built to the test. We're building to new tests. Now we're building to national testing standards. And that's the difficulty, is that we have this nationalized standard. I believe the best education goes on locally, and when it's controlled locally. And I want to stress that the business community, the chamber, all the folks are 100% behind the Common Core standards. We actually drafted legislation last year, the end of last year, when it appeared as though things were going to move forward very quickly. A group of us, we have a package of bills to combat Common Core. Now, mind you, they've been relegated to a dust heap in the Education Committee because Chairman Clymer is 100% for Common Core, and the education staff is as well. But we have legislation. Representative Tallman has House Bill 1551, which would repeal the State Board of Education Common Core standards. House Bill 1552 would exempt, that's Representative Bloom from Carlisle, and that would exempt private religious and homeschoolers from Common Core standards. My legislation, House Bill 1553, would prohibit state imposition of national standardized assessment and surveys in Pennsylvania public schools. House Bill 1554, prohibition of the transfer of individual student data to the federal government. Then House Bill 1555 would create an advisory committee to conduct a study of all Common Core standards prior to implementation. And some of those pieces of legislation came out of meetings. Had a meeting with Secretary Tamales before he was his exit was hastened in the Commonwealth as Secretary of Education, and he committed to me and a couple of other legislators what the Common Core standards wouldn't do in the Commonwealth. And some of our legislation took his commitments and wanted to codify those. We thought that was only logical. Well, if it's never going to do this, then let's just put it into law. Of course, we've seen no action on this. And frankly, I don't believe the commitments out of the Department of Education. I don't believe the commitments from the education establishment whatsoever. So if you are concerned about Common Core, I encourage you to continue to try to educate. I know I have a phenomenal lady in my district who knows more in her pinky finger than I could ever know about Common Core. Michelle Jansen,
Yes.
Debbie's very familiar with Michelle,
Yes.
and she's worked with Peg Luksick and some of those folks who are confronting Common Core in Pennsylvania. And all disclosure, my children are cyber schooled, and that's another area in public education in Pennsylvania that is under attack. My oldest 3 have been in cyber charter education for about 6 years now, and my youngest, who will be kindergarten age in the fall, will be starting his cyber education in the fall. Phenomenal wave of the future, a great method of using online education and really technology to make sure our young people get extraordinary education. I couldn't speak any more highly of our cyber charter experience. But cyber charters are being demonized all across Pennsylvania.
Yes.
And you will certainly hear regularly about how cyber charters are taking money. I sat with an administrator at a fundraising dinner on Saturday night. My wife and I are sitting there, kind of grinning from ear to ear and inside as well, as she tells us how the cyber charters are taking money from their money, taking their money from their public school. In most circumstances, you're looking about 1%, about a 1% payment to cyber charters. And that seems like a small price to pay for a modicum of school choice in Pennsylvania. Really, that's one of the few areas of school choice that you have is cyber charters, and then we have the EITC program to help folks afford a private or parochial education in Pennsylvania. So I am a big believer in cyber charters, and I encourage you to continue to educate yourself in that way, because the liberal and the education establishment, and honestly the Democrat and Republican establishments together are really beating the drum against cyber charter education. And I can tell you that there are bad situations. I can tell you of bad situations in traditional public school. I can tell you bad situations in homeschool. I can tell you bad situations in cyber charter school. They're out there. It happens. You don't have perfection, but I think in most circumstances you're going to see great success in cyber charter education. And that's what we want in all of our education, traditional public education as well. And so that's one of, I'm not even on the education committee, but it's something that is of great concern to me. And one reason I've never requested to be on the education committee is, very frankly, they've never, some of the members have been willing, but as a majority, they've never been able and ready and willing to do anything radical. My friend Kathy Rapp, my friend Todd Rock are able and ready to do something radical, but as a majority, even our Republican majority, who I think, is it Mary, was talking about how our Republican majority, we have not been willing and able to do anything radical in the House Education Committee, and that is one thing that I would dream for a future House Republican majority, is really deciding to take that issue head on and attempt to do great things for public education and all education in Pennsylvania, because I think as you expand options for education, things will certainly improve. But I probably have already taken up my 10 minutes, so I know.
You should know Common Core, the National Federation of Republican Women, have been against Common Core for years. We passed a resolution 2 years ago against Common Core, so we are standing very firm against it.
That's phenomenal, and I have to tell you that it was one of those things that was really snuck in the back door. I wasn't on the education committee, so it was last, let's see, we're in 2014, so about January of 2013, I started hearing about this Common Core. Now, mind you, I'm not on the education committee, but then when I went to my friends on the education committee, they were just hearing about it as well, and they're on the House Education Committee. So what you found is the bureaucrats and the education establishment was very savvy in bringing it behind, the curtain and making sure that the folks in the real elective policy positions weren't very familiar with what was happening with Common Core. So if you've been that far on the front lines, I salute the Republican women, because it is a concern, and I think you're concerned because your moms, your grandmothers, you understand what it's doing to our young people, and what the establishment is doing to our young people. And my wife is an amazing woman. I mean, we have 4 children. She's at home with them. She's helping educate them as their conductor there in our cyber charter process, and I marvel at what she does with my kids, because I certainly would be a much lesser man without her. So, well, thank you all very much. I appreciate it.